Well, hey there, welcome to my video on how to do some VM work. Now you might be wondering what good are VMs, what are VMs, and why should I even bother? So first off, what virtual machines are. Basically it's like running a computer inside your computer. What the VM software will do for you is basically give you the option or the ability to create basically just another desktop tower inside of your operating system, and it tricks your operating system into thinking. Well, it doesn't trick your operating system. It kind of like works with your operating system and tricks and creates like a virtual machine. I mean, it's that simple. That's what it is. It's a virtual machine. So I mean, I can just show you, which would be easier. So what you use them for is really entirely up to you. You can use them for a lot of different things. I myself use them for training. And also for testing. So, for example, if I have a server I'm working on, I don't want and I don't want to screw up the actual server. If I want to test out a patch or if I want to test out something else, I can just load an image of my server into a virtual machine and then just give it a shot and see how it works. Or I can try a troubleshooting fix on the virtual machine and see if it works. And if it does work, then move it onto their actual server. Or in the terms of training, if I want to let one of my guys learn how to do something, then I can let them, do it in the virtual machine, and it's really no harm, no foul on it. And you can really do anything with them. So start off, let's create a new virtual machine. So the thing I'm using here is called Oracle VM. It's a good free virtual machine manager. It works really well. There's a couple different ones. If you wanted to have like if you had like a separate server lying around, there's another thing called vSphere Hypervisor, or sorry, not vSphere Hypervisor. It's called vSphere, which is a bare metal hypervisor. And basically, it's really complicated for what this video is about, but it's just another thing you can do. Basically, it's another way to have virtual machines and have them running constantly in a network environment and have multiple people have access to them. It's useful for some things. If you're working on like security related stuff, you could use it for that. So anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new virtual machine. This whole thing, all this is really doing is setting up what you're going to call it and what the icon's going to be. None of this actually matters. You can call it whatever you want, pick whatever type or version you want. It won't matter. I'm just going to do this because it gives you the icon for Ubuntu in this case. I actually want to try out Ubuntu, then the latest version, and see how it works without having to screw with my operating system or load it onto another hard drive. So I can basically do that within this virtual machine, no problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little name that's meaningful to us but nobody else. And I'm going to pull up I already closed the window. Oh, I can't remember what the version of this was, but it was something. Now it'll also tell you, depending on which operating system you pick, what the recommended settings are. So the minimum you're going to need is 512 megabytes of memory. I'm going to go ahead and boost this up to about 4 because I have no shortage of memory on my system. And then I'm going to create a new virtual drive. When you're creating this hard drive, basically it's just taking up it's almost like creating a partition on your hard drive that you already have running. But not actually partitioning the hard drive, because you're just setting aside space. So it creates a file with a size of however big you want it to be. So we're going to create a new virtual drive. A VDI is perfectly fine. I can do dynamically allocated. That way it will fill up as it sets the space aside, but it doesn't fill it all up immediately. If you do a fixed size drive, it'll be faster because everything's already where it is. It doesn't need to search around within the file structure to put stuff in. But for what we're doing, again, dynamically size works fine. For most things, dynamically size works fine. So I'm going to pick one of my hard drives, put this in. I think I'm going to do in B under VMs and just leave it as ubuntu.vdi. We're going to boost the size up a bit. We'll give it let's say, I'm just type in 256 gigabyte. There we go. It's got to be capital. Alright, it's 256 gigabytes. And there we go. This is basically what it is. It's a powered off, blank, empty machine. Now, the first time you run this, it'll start up, hopefully in this window, yep. It's going to ask you where the startup disk is. If you own a copy of Microsoft Windows that you bought from Microsoft Office, you can download the ISO, or if you have another version of, if you have another operating system you want to load, or if you have like a disk, you can. Those are all different options you can choose. You can actually pick these two D&E are my two CD drives, so you can pick either of those. In this case, I'm going to choose my Ubuntu ISO. I'm just going to start there, and machine loads, and this is, let me get these out of the way, and this right here is basically exactly how it would look were you starting this in a regular machine. It's exactly what your screen, your monitor would show. So Ubuntu 14.04. And it's going to go through the entire install process. While I was doing this, unless there's something I have to interact with, which there might be, we're going to do install Ubuntu and disconnect to the internet, download updates while installing, sure. Sure, install third party, whatever. Yep. Now, I can choose this option, and it's not going to erase my actual hard drive, because what this is doing is it's looking on the fake hard drive, the virtual hard drive. And I can do whatever I want to do. If I want to try these different options, I can try different things. Now, here's another interesting, cool thing you can do with virtual machines. You can do something called take a snapshot. Now, a snapshot is basically a point in the machine. It's just like if you were using like a video game emulator for like Super Nintendo. If you take a snapshot, it's basically that is what the machine is at that particular time. So I'll take snapshot 1, we'll say pre-install, and we'll hit OK. And it saves the machine state. And if I ever need to go back, so let's say I just go back and let's say I just quit out of this whole thing. Okay. Okay, so I've got the whole thing quitted out. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to go back to that now. So what we'll end up doing is close the actual VM. And we'll say, okay, let's say power off the machine, restore the current snapshot. So that'll power off the machine, and the most recent snapshot will come back up, and we're right back here. So that's pretty useful. You can actually load the snapshot, and anytime you have the VM closed, you have to have the VM closed to install or to load a snapshot. You can't do it while it's running. Yep. Okay. So the other cool thing about talk about a bit more about what VMs are useful for. Sure, I'm in New York. It's close enough. That huge swath of area. Yeah, that's my. Yeah, Cherokee. What? Say Dave. VirtualBox. Cool. It even knows. Really? Okay. I'm not a Linux guru by any means. I know a few commands like grep. This isn't even really Linux. This is like. I mean, it is Linux, but it's more like a Windows version of Linux. Choose password 123456. 123456. Alright, we'll log in automatically. Sure, continue. And here we go. So while it's doing that, I'll back to talking about virtual machines. So virtual machines are also useful for things like if you're trying to browse the internet and you're worried about viruses, or you're doing something like you shouldn't be doing. That's a good use for a virtual machine, because what the virtual machine will do is you can actually use it connects to your own network adapter that's on your actual computer, but it does it via it does it in a more complicated way. It's going to be kind of beyond the scope to try to dumb this down and explain it the way I want to, but more or less you're able to connect to the internet through your VM, and your VM shows as your adapter for the most part. So you can pretty well effectively mask your actual everything via the VM. So that's kind of useful if you're trying to be shady about things, but more importantly, it's pretty useful for if you're trying to stay secure. So if, for example, you're trying to download something and you're worried that it might have a virus on it, you can do that in the VM, and the VM will capture everything. You can even load the antivirus on the VM to test, if you have a virus or you have something that has a virus in it. You can load everything on the VM and scan it there before you even put it on your regular computer. And the thing about the VM is it's not going to go through your network. Things aren't going to be able to get through the VM into your regular computer, because the VM is its own encapsulated operating system. Everything is the VM. Or the VM's everything's inside the VM itself. So that's a really useful thing about it. Downloading language packs. I don't know what language packs I really need. I would think English would be the only one I really need. I've never really tried Ubuntu too much. I've looked at it a few times, and that's about it. I've always wanted to build a system with it when I had some spare time, but I typically don't have the spare time, and I typically don't feel like doing this because I just haven't really thought of it, to be honest. But yeah, so this is basically what VMs are good for. Now, if you want to look at, I'm actually let me show you this real quick. So you can actually do a lot of pretty cool stuff with these too. You can load more than one at a time. So let's say I wanted to set up a Windows 7 machine. At the exact same time, I could set up a Win 7 machine and just do the exact same thing as I do with the other one. Now you want to be careful if you have a bunch of these running, because you want to you have to know how much memory you have available. For the most part, it's fairly smart. It's not going to be completely stupid and just say, oh well, I'm going to take up more memory than you have. I mean, it's not even possible. But what it'll do is it should dynamically allocate what memory it needs for whatever it has to have, if that makes any sense. But yeah, so you have to be careful if you're running a bunch of these that you don't set too much memory available to what you actually have available. I've got like 16 gigs, so 4 and 4 is plenty left over for my regular operating system. It still leaves half of it. So anyway, into some more advanced stuff with the VMs. You can do some pretty good cool stuff with this. Like, you can share your clipboards. So if you turn this to option, your host is your actual computer and your guest is your other computer, or you can just do bidirectional. And that way anything you copy from like this desktop, I can paste onto this one, or anything that I copy from the VM, I can post onto my regular desktop, which is pretty useful. What else do we got here? When you're setting up your system, you have a couple different options here. You can choose what the boot order is. You can boot from a floppy, a DVD, CD, hard disk, or the network, however you want to do it. You can choose your chipset if you're trying out different things. So if you have a problem, if you were a developer and you wanted to try different chipsets to see how something would run in them, you can do that. For your pointing device, you can choose how it works. PS2 mouse is really the better way to do that for a PC. You have some extended features, which probably not going to mess with too much. You can choose how many processors are allocated to each VM. I allocate 1 core to each VM because I have a total of 8 on my i7 that I have. So also pretty useful. For your display, you can choose how much video memory you allocate to each display. If you were doing some video games, if you wanted to do some gaming within the VM, you could enable 3D acceleration, and you could increase the amount of memory that you plug into it, which is pretty useful. You can choose how many monitors you have for each VM. So if you wanted to have like a 3 monitor VM thing going on, you could do that. Not super useful, I guess. You can set up to use the VM as a server. For example, if I wanted to use it for, like, say I was running like a Minecraft server, and I wanted to limit specifically how many resources that I could allocate to that Minecraft server, I could run it within a VM, and I can specifically control how much resources from my hardware is being put into that server, and that's one of the things you can put in. You can enable video capture for if you wanted to do demonstrations on how to do something. For storage, you can add in new drives. So, for example, we have a CD drive currently connected to the IDE. We could actually add in other drives. So we can add in, we can create new virtual hard drives, and create new virtual CD drives, and create new SATA disk drives or hard drives. You can even pick whether it's a SATA or not. You can choose which audio driver that the machine is going to use. You can choose the network of drivers, how many adapters there are, what kind of adapter it is. You can go into the advanced settings, and this is where you can do some of that cool stuff, and you can actually spoof MAC addresses and stuff by going through here and choosing, you can actually just make whatever MAC address you want, and then you can do port forwarding for, where you want to forward certain requests to. And it looks like Ubuntu has finished loading on that. You can also do stuff with serial ports, although that's not very common. You can still do it. You can play with the USB devices. You can add, let's see, so you can add like a new filter, and you can take stuff that you have that's currently connected to your regular, you can take stuff that's connected to your actual computer, and you can assign it to the VM. Now, if you put it on the VM, you can't actually get to it outside of the VM until you turn it off inside the VM or turn off the VM. So you have to keep a watch on that. Now, shared folders are something you can use to share between VMs and your actual machine. So it's just a thing to think about. And all right, looks like we are loading up Ubuntu for the first time in the VM. Now, also worth noting is you can't really do much with the settings. Anything with the settings. You can have the network settings, I guess, and the USBs, but you can't do much else while the computer is up. So you have to be kind of careful there. So basically, here's my little virtual machine version of Ubuntu. This is also useful if you could find a VM for Linux. I mean, pretty much everything is free on Linux anyway, as is. But you can actually, if you wanted to run Windows programs, you can get a VM for Linux and load Windows in the VM, and then instead of using Wine, you could actually run Windows on a VM, which is kind of useful. I'm doing kind of the opposite right now, and as you can see though, I can search for anything and it's actually connected and going to the internet. There's nothing there's nothing special about it. Well, there's some it's kind of special, but there's no let's see, David Irritation. Is that my channel? I don't even remember anymore. I think it's Dave B, isn't it? Yep, there I am. And so you can go through, and that's my other video. But yeah, I mean, it works just like a regular operating system, albeit the resolution's kind of low. We can switch to full screen to not show message again, although still I don't want it to be that way. I wonder if scaled mode. Hey, there we go. So yeah, now it's in scaled mode, although it still doesn't look quite right. But you get the idea. So yeah, I think that's basically what VMs are. That's how they work. It's how they're used. If you have any questions about them, or want to see some other stuff you can do with VMs, or any other questions about, I don't know, computer, software, IT in general, put them in the comments. Otherwise, like, subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this and you want to support me for doing the stuff I do. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, guys.